Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, back in California, back in my home studio, fresh off a trip to Utah. So, first of all, hopefully everybody who was traveling for Christmas was able to get home safe and sound. Pretty scary walking into the airport today, seeing hundreds of bags kind of curtained off from Southwest employees. So, if you were traveling, hopefully you got home safely this weekend. So, that being said, we are here today to talk about the Chargers and Rams game this weekend. Obviously, Chargers already coming off of a playoff clinching win against the Colts, but still lots to play for here against the Rams. And joining me to do that are my guys, Tyler and Alex. Tyler, we'll start with you, man. How are you doing this evening?
Doing very well myself. I was a little bit worried because after the game on Monday, we got that message that a certain Big Bear was returning. But then Brandon Staley yesterday was like, "Oh, no update." So I just got a little nervous there because I put that in the Discord and was all ready to go. But nope, Joey Bosa is unofficially back.
Yes, officially back, which we'll get into here in a second. Of course, Brandon Staley playing coy all weekend, all week long about Joey Bosa. So happy to have that good news to talk about for the home stretch. Alex is here as well, man. Alex, what's up? How are you doing? How's Florida?
Yeah, Florida's good. Joey Bosa trains in Florida, so happy to have him back. And pass rushing against Rams quarterback Baker Mayfield. Imagine saying that sentence before the season, but that is how topsy-turvy things have gone. So I think a lot of people were looking for a Stafford Herbert Super Bowl versus coming up team, fight for LA showdown, and it's going to be the Baker Mayfield versus Joe Lombardi trying to get his head out of his ass show for an hour. And I hope it's good.
Yeah, I hope it is good. I mean, obviously, before the season, this was one of the games that, we had all circled. Obviously, prime time over Christmas break. This is going to be a rare opportunity for me personally to get to see SoFi at night. And then, of course, the Rams had to, kind of shit the bed this season. And now it's happening at 1 p.m. So, I will be there along with Tyler and Arjun. We'll be kind of in a similar section there. So if you're at the game, come say hi. And like we talked about, it's Arjun's birthday this weekend. So shout out to Arjun. All right, as we mentioned, Joey Bosa officially designated to return. So I know the way that the NFL does this is a little confusing. So he is officially designated to return, but he technically is still on injured reserve until the Chargers actually activate him off of injury reserve. So we do expect that to happen later on this week. The Chargers usually do that on Saturday. At that point, the Chargers will have to cut somebody from the active roster in order for Joey Bosa to return to his active spot. So some technicalities there. We do expect Joey Bosa to play this week. Joey Bosa himself said that he also expects to play at least, a handful of snaps and get kind of back in the swing of things. So there's a lot to take in terms of what Joey was talking about. But Alex, we'll start with you first and foremost. The thought process of Joey coming back, now that we know it actually is happening, how important do you think this is for the Chargers and the Chargers defense specifically?
I mean, it's really important. Perhaps not as important as it was a month ago, where it just, no one outside of Khalil Mack, was really doing anything pass rush oriented on the defensive line. But now you had the reemergence of Kyle Van Noy. You've had Chris Rumpf in on the action, which has been really good. And Joey Bosa, you're adding him back into the fray, of course, as well. So having all of your, I guess, edge players peaking at the right time. You've talked about the defensive line, which has been playing really well the past few weeks as a whole. Racked up a ton of pressures and sacks on Nick Foles in the Colts game. So they're going in the right direction. You add him back as far as, playoffs are concerned. Obviously, having Joey Bosa gives you a much better chance to win. It was just interesting, hearing him talk today, because I think for a while we were just like, well, it's a groin surgery, what's kind of the holdup here, right? We sort of expected him back a couple of weeks ago, and then you sort of get into the groin and the core injury and the full extent of what Joey Bosa's injuries had built up to, over time, to the point where he needed this sort of large scale, surgery so he could sort of be himself again on the field. So, excited to see that. Of course, him back in the lineup. And I'm curious to see how the Chargers play this out in the last 2 weeks, because he is coming back at a time where the Chargers have clinched a playoff spot, right? It would be a little bit different if they had lost at Miami or if they had lost at Indianapolis and they, needed this game to clinch a playoff spot, but that's not the environment that Joey Bosa is coming back into. So, interested to see if his snap count will be 5, 10, 15 snaps, to see how that works in his return to limited action, assuming the Chargers win and, are still in a fight potentially for that 5th seed. Do they increase his usage next week? Depending on the result, do they kind of decrease it a little bit, depending on how his body responds to everything in general in his first game back? So very excited to have Joey Bosa back, but more curious to see how it works out in these last 2 weeks going into the playoffs.
Yeah, technically, it's you can still only win or lose one game, and a game, 10 weeks ago is worth basically just as much. But when Keenan Allen came back, once he hit that snap threshold, they were like, okay, go sit on the sideline, and he wasn't there the entire second half. So,
Yeah.
Like you said, though, we'll see what they do with him, another star player, of course. When I was told that he was coming back on Monday, the kind of guess for snap counts, was to go 10 to 15-ish snaps this weekend and then be limited again the following week at about 20 to 25 snaps. Again, they could change that if for some reason things happen and they run up on the Rams, which I doubt, but if they get off to a hot Baker Mayfield Rams start against the Broncos in week 18, then maybe they could, sit him more than they expected. I do expect with the way they've been handling everything, or at least especially the last like 2/3 of the season, because they've been, hit pretty hard when they bring guys back too early. I think they'll lean more cautious here, especially with Joey Bosa. There really is no reason to get him out there and play more snaps. Like, he just needs to be out there, game shape, whatever, get some reps in. But otherwise, like, you don't actually need him to win these 2 games. I hope not. So I think they'll just play it cautious, and we'll see him, full once the playoffs hit, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Joey, right? Like it was really, I don't know what the right phrasing is here, but it was just kind of concerning a little bit to hear about the way that he's felt, physically
Yeah.
the last couple of seasons, and just how he has been in, serious pain essentially every single day that he's gone to practices and things like that. And this core muscle groin issue has essentially, kind of bothered him for the last 2 years. So, the way that he's kind of describing it is this surgery was kind of something that had to happen all along. And then obviously the actual groin injury kind of just accentuated that and made it more pressing than probably it should have been. So, I'm glad to hear that he's feeling as best as he's ever felt, according to him. He was talking about working with his trainer, his personal trainer, now that he's able to like really push things and go full speed. So, it's good to see, or good to hear rather, that he is feeling as good as he has in quite some time. But at the same time, it's like, dang, dude, I watched every single snap. I watched every single Joey Bosa snap from last season over the summer. And
Yeah.
if you had told me that he was going through that kind of pain, I would have said you were crazy, right? Like, his tape was so good last year. His production was still at an elite level. So it's just kind of a reminder that you never really know what these players are
That's
going
exactly
through.
the same thought that I had.
And Joey fighting through these injuries, and then a couple weeks ago, there's all this talk on social media about like questioning his toughness and questioning his commitment to the team. And now we hear that he's played through this kind of core muscle injury for basically the past 2 seasons, on top of the other things, and concussions and a tricep injury and things like that. So it was just obviously good to have Joey back, but a harsh reality of kind of the seasons and health wise that he's kind of been playing through over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I get that player fans are like, they really want Joey Bosa or any of these guys to come back, but once we start diving into, well, they're not committed, they're not tough or whatever, like, you got to be kidding me. I think last year against the Chiefs, he was hurt in like the first quarter. He got hurt. I think he might have been hurt going into it, but then he got hurt, limped off the field. I thought Joey Bosa was out. Then he comes back in and has a 10 pressure, 1 sack, 3 or 4 run stop game. It's like the best game he had all year. So I don't want to hear the Joey Bosa, oh, he's not tough enough or whatever. I know that's not most of the people in our chat or even most of the fans, but those that do, that kind of go that direction. Well, he's back, and I think it's been worth the wait. Or I think it will be.
Yeah, so in terms of on the field, I think that obviously this benefits the Chargers greatly because they're able to really mix and match. And it took a long time for these secondary pass rushers to get going. I mean, we've seen 3 very productive weeks for Kyle Van Noy. I mean, there was kind of a lull there for Khalil Mack as well. In kind of like those weeks like 6 through 9 ish. Chris Rumph is starting to come on as well. So Joey being back, I think obviously opens up a lot more options. And, the fact that those guys are starting to figure it out a little bit allows them to be flexible with Joey as they continue to ramp him up. So if the plan right now is obviously, around 15 snaps this week, maybe we get around 25, the week 18 game at Denver, and then the playoffs, you're probably talking about closer to 50. So we'll see what happens there specifically, but because of the way that the other players have played, they do have a little bit of flexibility here with Joey and how they're able to kind of ramp him up.
Yeah, 100%. So a couple people were talking about this in the chat. Who do you think is the cut candidate then? My first obvious guess would be Tuska, but as we've seen, if Ryan Ficken wants him on special teams, he'll be there on special teams. So who do you think the cut would be?
I mean, I would think it'd be more of the crowd of the guys who have been kind of healthy scratches.
Uh-huh.
But at the same time, I mean, Chris Rumph was playing a lot of the special teams role that Tuska is playing now when Joey was healthy. Yeah. So my thought process is that you cut Tuska and Chris Rumph and kind of go back to his special teams role a little bit.
Yeah, I could see that. And they cut Atauchu as soon as somebody else was available. So maybe it was Rumph.
Yeah, they could certainly cut a running back, as Jacob points out. Sony Michel, we've barely seen him. Isaiah Spiller reportedly that's a whole other issue, just like not ready to play. Larry Roundtree is not on the active roster anymore, right? Like he was.
How many elevations has Roundtree had this season? Is it 2?
Well, they signed him to the active roster and then they cut him, so it
at
resets,
least 2. Right? But I don't know if they've been on the same. If you're cut and then
I think it resets after you get cut.
Okay, I think it's at least 2 then. I don't think it's more than that though. I could easily Google search this, but I'm going with 2.
Yeah, because I know he was signed to the active roster, and then they cut him because he was signed when Joshua Kelly was injured, and then they cut him when Joshua Kelly came back. And so if it resets, they have 2 more elevations for Larry Roundtree. So they could cut one of the running backs. I don't think it would be one of the off-ball linebackers. I mean, Eamon Ogbongbemiga and Nick Niemann are just like crushing it on special teams right now. And if you would have told me, or if you tell me that those two had some kind of like bet on who gets more special teams tackles, I would believe you, because they the 2 of them just fly around on special teams. It's actually really fun to watch. So I would think that Derek Tuska is kind of the natural candidate there, and then Chris Rumph kind of goes back to playing more on special teams.
Yeah, that's a good call.
So obviously a little bit about our show today, where I did want to mention kind of the scenarios for the Chargers and the playoffs. Obviously they have clinched their spot. The Ravens will not have Tyler Huntley on Sunday, or Tyler Huntley is going to start because they won't have Lamar Jackson, excuse me. So obviously they are the Sunday night game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Essentially the scenario for the Chargers and the 5 seed is that them and the Ravens just have to have the same record theoretically. So the Ravens either lose both of their games and the Chargers win 1. The Chargers win both of their games, the Ravens lose 1. As long as the Chargers and the Ravens have the same record, the Chargers will get the 5 seed. If the Chargers lose out, they'll still make the playoffs. But in that scenario where they lose out, they're probably talking about the 7 seed. So I've gotten this question a lot here, over the last few days about resting starters and potentially, opting for better health as opposed to a better seed. So Alex, we'll start with you here. Where are you at with resting players for the Chargers over the next 2 weeks?
Definitely not this week. I mean, because you're still contending potentially for the 5th seed if you win out and Baltimore loses one of their last 2. Now, if we get into a conversation of if you say the Chargers lose to the Rams and then suddenly they're probably in a position where I mean, depending on what happens with Miami this week, they could find themselves locked into the 6th seed. If Miami were to lose, I believe, because then I think New England, I don't know, New England might be on 8 or 9 losses. I'm not sure. I think both of them have 8. But basically, you could kind of construct a situation where the Chargers lose a game and the Ravens win, and then they're suddenly eliminated from the 5 seed discussion. And then it would just be more of an issue of whether they would want to be the 6th or the 7th. But still, because they have a whole game difference with the Jets and the Patriots, and Miami's probably also losing this week, then you probably are locked into the 6th seed at this point. So depends on what they have to play for. As long as there is something to play for and you can get that 5th seed, I think that you go for it pretty much. And this is a team where, kind of depending on the side of the ball you're going to talk about, if you want to talk about like resting Joey Bosa, for example, and resting some of the guys that have had injuries or are coming back, that's one thing. But like, we still need to see more out of this offense. I mean, heading into the playoffs, because in its current state, they're not hanging in a game with Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or any of those teams. So you really want to see at least 2 clean weeks, I think, of offensive football. And I think that involves, as long as there is something to play for in that 5th seed, playing Justin Herbert and playing your guys effectively. So, I don't know what the coaching staff's going to do. They've always been a little bit more cautious. But at this point, I think that they just kind of stay the course and play their guys. As far as resting, I think you only do it if there's nothing to play for.
Yeah, I think you're at least getting a game and a half out of everybody regardless. As far as resting guys go, just the guys that are hurt. I mean, Derwin James is practicing, obviously concussion. I thought there was a chance that maybe he would sit out the 2 games just to keep it safe, but nope, he's back out there. As far as, something to play for, I guess the games next week haven't been determined in terms of times. So I actually don't know when these teams are playing. So like if the Ravens played before the Bengals or something, if the Ravens and Bengals played before the Chargers, then you'd kind of know what you're fighting for. But so far it's to be determined.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see that game actually being a primetime game. So if they decide to do that, otherwise it could be like Giants, Eagles or something. But Ravens, Bengals could definitely be primetime because that's kind of a jockeying for the division there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the Chargers are going to have to play other guys all the way through. And like Alex said, you have to figure out your offense. Now, listen, if for some reason against the Broncos, they're down by 40 points or 30 points, like they were against the Jaguars or the Seahawks. Sure. Yeah, please rest your guys. Let's be smart here. I don't think you need to go out there and prove anything at that point. Just go into the postseason healthy. But I think we're getting 2 full games out of this group.
I would assume that with the Ravens playing primetime this week, that the Jags-Titans game is going to be the Sunday Night Football game, right?
I mean, they're gonna put Josh Dobbs on Sunday Night Football?
I mean, it's a division title game. I mean, it's either that or the AFC North one. I mean, are they going to do back-to-back weeks of the Ravens? I don't know. The Bills are going to prime game this week too. So I don't know. I mean, up to NBC.
They've gone back-to-back to the Chargers. So
yeah, we did do that.
That was fun. You remember that one? Yeah.
Yeah, we had to stay up until 3 a.m. to podcast.
Yep. But yeah, I feel like they would go with the Jags-Titans since that's a division championship game. It's the AFC South, but it's still technically a division.
Still technically a division. Unfortunately for us. I mean, how great would it be to be in that division right now? I think that Brandon Staley was talking about this the other day when he was asked about it. And I think, their focus is playing their best football, which I think like Alex is kind of highlighting, especially on the offensive side of things. So I would expect them to go out and attack these games as if they were still kind of in that back against the wall fighting for playoff mode. And, we know there's so many guys here on this team that are connected to the Rams that they're going to want to beat the Rams, even though the Rams are obviously, not their former self. So I would expect them to play it as if they needed to win, because they do. I think you much rather prefer a 5-4 matchup as opposed to a 6-3 matchup. So I think for the Chargers, they have a ton to play for still if they can get to a 4-seed matchup with the Jaguars in a warm weather place, a team that also hasn't necessarily been there in the playoffs, because I think people are kind of underrating that aspect of things where
Mhm.
You know, you're talking about playing at Cincinnati, who just went to the Super Bowl. Like, they've been there, done that. You know,
Mhm.
obviously Kansas City has been to a few Super Bowls. You know, the Bills have made playoff runs as well. So I think if you are traveling to Jacksonville, it's a much more even playing field than any of the other matchups in terms of experience, in terms of weather, and obviously the individual matchup. I think, you know, people will obviously point to the blowout loss, but that was the first game after Herbert broke his ribs. Obviously,
Mhm.
Joey got injured that day. Rashawn Slater got injured that day. So that just was kind of a clusterfuck of a game from the get go, and I would not expect anything close to a similar result in a playoff game. 14 weeks later.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect a similar result either. I mean, the Jags are a really well-coached team. Like, they put it together. Trevor Lawrence is broken out, but I don't know if that's a game that I'm more scared of than playing the Bengals or the Chiefs, per se. And plus, look, you want a higher seed anyway. Depending on what happens in the playoffs, something crazy could happen, and maybe down the road the Chargers are hosting a playoff game, right?
Yeah, that's
don't
true.
think it's going to happen, but you would want the higher seed in that case where chaos does happen. And look, there's still a 30% chance or whatever the odds are heading into that week 18 game that the Titans can win the division.
Yeah,
If Derrick Henry goes supernova, and we've seen him do it before, and he has 3 touchdowns and 500 yards, which like, after a week of rest, I mean, I wouldn't put it past the Titans to win it. I mean, everyone I think would pick the Jaguars to win it given the current situation, but
Mhm.
if the Chargers are the 5th seed heading to the 4th seeded Titans, that's still something to play for, as opposed to the Chargers being the 6th seed have to go to Cincinnati, right? Or having to go to Buffalo or Kansas City or any of these other places potentially in the first round. So yeah, you definitely want the higher seed, not just because of a potentially weaker AFC South opponent, but just having higher seed in general.
Yep. I'm a big Titans fan next week.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest thing, like I mentioned, the Chargers have done a great job getting all this momentum going for their season. Obviously, you want to be able to keep that going into the playoffs as much as you can, and be able to get into a situation where Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack can heat up anybody else against the league. I think, you know, this pass rush showing up the way it is going to give the Chargers a chance to beat any of these teams. So I think that's the most important thing, is just get back into a rhythm on offense if you can. Easier said than done when you're running stick, you know, every single trip to the red zone, but it is what it is. So make the transition, asking about SoFi and the injury rate. He thinks lower the seed, the better. I mean, I think a lot of the home field advantage is kind of overrated at this point, but what's not overrated is the higher seeds don't have to travel. Like, I think if the Chargers in 2018 had been able to get home field, we're probably talking about a different postseason outcome, as opposed to them traveling to Baltimore, traveling back to LA, and then traveling to New England. So home field advantage for me is honestly more about just not having to travel across the country in these games.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as SoFi having the highest rate of injuries, I mean, obviously people have talked about like the turf and all that stuff, but the Rams were one of the healthiest teams in the league last year, and the Chargers, had a top 10 healthiest team in the league. So, I mean, that stuff varies from year to year, and there's plenty of other stadiums that have turf as well, right? In terms of that whole debate, turf versus grass. So, I mean, I don't know if that's something that's the reason that the Chargers should not want to play a home game, but
I also think MetLife has to be the highest. I feel like MetLife or the Washington Commanders field, it has had way more injuries, just off of the top of my head. I don't know. We'll see. All right. As always, we'll dive into the Rams side of this matchup here for a little bit. Tyler has prepared a slideshow as usual. Appreciate the hands off so we don't go back and forth here. So Tyler's crushing it with the graphics, as you saw in the thumbnail with the Brandon Staley cat cow pose on this slideshow for our audio
What is
audience.
he doing, dude? Does he not know that he's filmed?
I mean, I don't know if he's always filmed, but I mean, he works out before every single game. So I think that was just a poor, timing aspect from ESPN, but either way, it provided some hilarious content on Monday night.
I want to see the ESPN like operator who was just like, yeah, we got to put this in the cut in back from commercial. that guy knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing to Twitter, and he was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this.
As opposed to when he's like running stairs or whatever else he does, he's like, oh yeah, the cat cow, let's go. All right. So for our audio audience here, Tyler has a Rams preview with Baker Mayfield's face on top of a chef, obviously self-explanatory there. And then at the bottom, he says, F them playoffs instead of F them picks. So fantastic work as always, Tyler.
Thanks. I thought of it 20 minutes ago.
Well done. Obviously, in terms of the coaching staff, we'll dive in here a little bit. Sean McVay, obviously the head coach, also calls plays, really is the engine of the Rams offense. Defensive coordinator Raheem Morris, somebody who was a hot head coaching candidate name last offseason. Curious to see if that kind of carries over this year. Rams defense is taking a bit of a step back. Obviously, injuries to Aaron Donald and some regression from Jalen Ramsey will do that. Offensive coordinator Liam Cohen, soon to be offensive coordinator again at the University of Kentucky. So he's kind of going back and forth. Actually, I don't even know if he's still with the team or not. Curious. I don't know, but he's leaving soon. And then special teams coordinator Joe Decamalis. I don't even know how to say that. But Tyler, your thoughts on the Rams coaching staff this year and the job they've done with all the injuries and things like that?
Well, they're 5-10, so I don't think they've done a great job. I mean, it's like it is what it is. Like they're a really banged up team that lost some of their best players, but right down to the quarterback. So somehow a team got worse than the Chargers. Whatever is at SoFi, whatever's in LA, it's not working for these teams this year. After both teams were, I'm pretty sure, very healthy last year. I like and respect that McVay sees his team on the decline with no picks, and he's like, "Yeah, I think I'll retire." I respect that immensely. I'm sure you'll get a nice paycheck for all of that. I really do like some of the guys on this coaching staff. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name, but the interior defensive line coach, I think it's Henderson for the Rams. He's their Jay Rodgers. He's the reigning interior defensive line or defensive line coach of the year. Respect what he's done with guys like Greg Gaines, who was basically just a plug run stuffer coming out of college, and has really turned into a solid all-around player, like you'd hope someone like a Braden Fajoko could end up becoming, although Greg Gaines is a better pass rusher, obviously. But overall, good group of guys, I guess. I mean, Raheem Morris, they're still 16th in EPA per play, which is pretty impressive. I think it's a well-coached group. And then Jalen Ramsey, well, I already told you guys that story, so never mind.
Yeah, I think that's one that you can leave between us as opposed to putting it out there for the world to hear. I respect the Rams for, going out and getting Baker Mayfield and still trying to win games. I mean, they don't have any picks, obviously, for the upcoming first round, but we're seeing a lot of other teams kind of mail it in right now in similar circumstances. So, the Las Vegas Raiders, obviously, in the Derek Carr situation, and they are playing for picks, and the Tennessee Titans haven't exactly been super competitive with their roster after losing to the Chargers, and the way they've kind of declared people out and putting people on IR. So I respect the way that they're fighting through all of these injuries. I respect them trying to figure out if Baker Mayfield can still play or not. Bobby Wagner and Jalen Ramsey are still really doing a lot of good things out there and keeping this defense afloat. So I think the Rams are doing some good things, obviously, but just they started off in such a poor spot with all of the injuries, and then obviously once they lost Cooper Kupp, that was essentially the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, I did just do a Google search. So Liam Cohen is still with the Rams until the completion of the season, at which point he will then leave to Kentucky. Weird Rams team just as a whole, as we've talked about, like everyone got injured, and so they're in this position, which isn't terribly surprising. Credit to them for not tanking, but they're also not tanking because they don't have the pick. If they had the pick, I'm sure that Bryce Perkins would still be thrown into the fire every week until they got a high enough pick. So credit to them, I guess, for trying to get Baker Mayfield and make all these kinds of moves in the intermediate here. I guess that's kind of the main thing we'll talk about when we get to players and sort of that stuff. But good for Sean McVay for holding it together, I guess. Like Tyler said, I don't know how much longer Sean McVay is going to continue to do this with, the rumors about potential retirement. But, the Rams obviously have a top tier coaching staff kind of in the league. And it's one of the things that scares you, I guess, in this game, because this is not a talented roster. The Chargers are absolutely the more talented roster. But if the Rams can, win the turnover battle and just do sort of some of the things that coaching staff has enabled them to do, run simple offense, don't make mistakes. It's one of the things that if you're concerned about a trap game here for the Chargers, certainly that coaching staff gives you some pause.
Yeah, we'll talk about this roster now for a second here. The Rams, obviously, for me, the reason why they ultimately made a playoff run last year was because of how deep of a talent they had this year. Looking at these losses, you're talking about Von Miller, obviously Sebastian Joseph Day, Darius Williams, Austin Corbett, Odell Beckham Jr., Troy Reader, all players who were key contributors to their postseason run. I mean, Sony Michel, you could put him on there and on this graphic as well. And then the guys they brought in obviously are not playing too hot. Allen Robinson, before he got injured, was just not involved on offense. Troy Hill, not the same player he was in 2020 when Brandon Staley was there. Bobby Wagner has been solid for them. That's been a good addition, but their whole thing was like replacing Von Miller with Bobby Wagner, which really just didn't work out. Baker Mayfield, Ode Abushi, obviously recent additions. Ode Abushi won his appeal, so he is playing this week. He did not get suspended, ended up just getting fined for his role in that altercation last week with Randy Gregory, which I think is the right decision. But then you're obviously talking about these injuries too. So the Rams roster just has gone through a massive turnover, and obviously not all of it is, by design. A lot of it is by injury. So this is really kind of the bare bones of their roster that the Chargers will face this week.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me a bit of the Titans, where they didn't have not that the Rams didn't do anything. You go get Allen Robinson, you get Bobby Wagner. That's definitely doing something more than the Titans did. But I feel like the losses that the Titans had were so significant, and the additions that they had were not moving the needle much for them. And with all these injuries, that I just feel like they're kind of stuck. And with a lack of draft picks, or the draft picks, I should say, not doing so hot for them, and not really having like a Chiefs-like season where everyone's contributing, or the Seahawks where everyone's contributing, you just see those two teams that are typically in the postseason or fighting to win the division, or have been winning the division, and they just didn't make it this year because the additions weren't enough, the losses were too much, and the injuries caught up to them, and their draft class wasn't that great. Not that they could do a lot; there weren't a whole lot of high draft picks for the Rams.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, you put the draft class in here, which they had more draft picks than usual, but Logan Bruss, their first pick in round 3, I think he like tore his ACL or something like that in training camp. Jacoby Durant has been coming on recently. Kyron Williams has spent a lot of time injured as well, broke his arm or something like that. Quentin Lake, Darion Quenjic haven't really played a lot. Daniel Hardy, like any of these guys outside of Jacoby Durant, I don't think are really playing significant roles for them. So just they didn't really replace what they got or what they lost last year, and then they've just been in a tough spot for the roster wise. I guess my question here, general NFL speak, do we think that Sean McVay is actually going to retire? Like, I don't know. I just have a hard time thinking that he's going to leave on this kind of note after having kind of a dumpster fire season.
I mean, I don't think he'll retire this year, but I think he'll, consider it whenever his extension is up. What is it, 2025, 2026? Not sure exactly. But, in terms of retiring and going to the media world, I guess the question is, how much longer does McVay want to do this if this roster is going to be in decline, right? You'll still have Stafford and Cooper Kupp back next year, and this team will certainly just be better on like having those two guys back alone, and Aaron Donald, say Jalen Ramsey takes a positive regression back towards being Jalen Ramsey again, right? So, you can sort of talk yourselves into the Rams, being a contender certainly in the NFC again, outside of San Francisco. Really, their division is not all that strong going forward. We'll see what the Seahawks do kind of with the, Geno situation and them going forward as a team. But this is a Rams team that if you just get the players back, it's easy to talk yourselves into them, just getting back to being a Super Bowl contender pretty quickly. But as far as, what the long term of Sean McVay is and what the long term of the Rams are, if you don't have a lot of picks and your players get older, potentially Aaron Donald and, Matthew Stafford eventually retiring when they retire, then that can sort of open the door towards, Sean McVay eventually making an exit from whatever, this era of the Rams has been.
And I believe that's what he said too. When this core nucleus, it's their time to go, I will also go. But I think if you lose someone like Matthew Stafford, that kind of accelerates that, because then you don't have any first round picks unless you want to go hit on a third rounder or whatever they have next year or the following year. You're kind of just stuck in this purgatory. But I guess it depends really on Matthew Stafford. I think if Stafford continues next year, McVay comes back. If not, I mean, I personally would just let it be someone else's problem. I know that's maybe not how you want to go out, but you want a Super Bowl. So, I mean, you can head out.
Yeah, that's true. He could follow the Sean Payton route. So, as his lit points out, there you go.
Yeah, we can trade for him in 3 years or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like there's this Sean McVay is going to be the new Bill Cowher, John Gruden every year, where he becomes like this great media announcer, and then it's like, ooh, is he going to come back to coaching? And then eventually some team will offer him some insane contract that he can't say no to. But I feel like that's where we're headed to with Sean McVay, because I mean, he's a great talker. I mean, and also is just a great analyst of the game too. So some network is going to pick him up eventually if he does plan to retire at some point, and we'll sort of be in that situation with him. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's going to retire, but the Rams don't have a lot of draft capital. They're not developing a lot of players right now. Kyron Williams is a guy that has played a little bit since he's gotten back from injury, right? In addition to Jacoby Duran. But yeah, just really depends on where the nucleus of that team goes, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, Tyler, again, great work on the slideshow as usual. We'll dive in now to the Charger side of things. As we do every single week, we'll kick this off just from a general standpoint in terms of our victory formation picks here. And we'll get a little bit more specific as we do every single week. So I'm going to start this one off. I think for me, I've talked a lot about the run game. This is not a week where you want to run the football, especially, with the Rams defense playing that the way they are. Even without Aaron Donald, they're still one of the best run defenses in the league. Tyler talked about Greg Gaines. So for me, the natural pivot here should be the emphasis on play action passing. This is something that Arjun has talked about all season long, and I will continue to highlight this point as well, because it is the best form of the Chargers offense. I think you saw glimpses of it, later in the second quarter, later in the fourth quarter. These play action deep crossers to Mike Williams were really successful against the Indianapolis Colts, and it was their best form of offense. So as a whole, last week, Justin Herbert, had 36 total dropbacks, and only 10 of them were play action. That is simply not good enough for me. I don't think that's good enough for this offense. I don't think it's good enough to win multiple playoff games. You have to go back to that play action well. And I think watching the film back, there was that play early in the first quarter where they did that fake toss rollout that they like to do. It's kind of a different look to get Justin Herbert out on the move. Obviously, Kwity Paye, or not, it wasn't Kwity Paye. It was their backup pass rusher sacked Justin Herbert. Herbert obviously almost broke contained there and still made a play, but he ultimately did get sacked, and it felt like they didn't go back to the rollout game for another 2.5 quarters. It was so frustrating to watch them just continue to go back to the traditional drop back concepts that Joe Lombardi is comfortable with. So this is a game where the Rams could catch you sleeping if you're going to come out and do your usual stuff. It's not going to work against Bobby Wagner and Jalen Ramsey, who are still playing at a really high level. So for me, the way that you attack this Rams defense is working the edges, working the corners, and working the safeties, obviously outside of Jalen Ramsey. So Joe Lombardi absolutely has to stick with play action, even if it doesn't work early, because it is the best source of offense for the Chargers. It's the way that they're best able to hit explosives. And frankly, it's the only way that they hit explosives is out of the play action game. So sticking with play action for me is going to be the key for Sunday and probably, frankly, for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I don't know why we're on this either or kind of approach when it comes to rolling Herbert out. I mean, against the Dolphins, it was kind of unintentional because he was bailing for his life, but
Yeah.
you just see what is so successful with this team. Think of every highlight Herbert throw that you can think of off the top of your head. He's probably on the move doing that. And he's doing it 50 yards that way. He's doing it 60 yards that way, 65 yards down the middle of Jalen Guyton. Not that they have to be those chunk plays. They can also be, like you said, those shallow crossers or whatever it is. Get these guys involved, get them involved on the move. I just don't see how you go into the postseason against the Bills defense and say, okay, we're going to stick with the traditional drop back offense and see that work in the snow or whatever. Like, I don't know what Lombardi's been thinking. I understand that you can't do that every single time. For some reason, on like 2nd and 12, they run a lot of play action, which I think is hilarious because I don't really see the Chargers running it much on 2nd and 12, but whatever.
Yeah.
But they got to get away from it. The numbers, the film, the feel, the flow, everything suggests that what you're saying, Steven, is correct. They should go to that. They have not been doing that consistently, and it's hurting them.
Yeah, I think you just kind of look at what this Chargers offense have been, and it's just not good enough, like at this rate. And you would like to just see the Chargers run their offense with Joe Lombardi like they have nothing to lose. I mean, because in a way they don't, right? I mean, yeah, technically you can lose playoff seeding and like those kinds of things, but there's no risk factor here, right? It's outside of potentially injuries and playing with that. But that's just kind of the state of the game. I would love to see more play action. I don't know if Lombardi's going to open up the playbook, but I wonder if part of the approach against the Colts was just, hey, look, let's wrap this thing up and play a very like conservative game because we're not going to have to go all out against the Colts and maybe against the Rams. In the current state they're in, they can just kind of unleash, a couple more plays. Maybe we see a couple more Joshua Kelly style, trick plays to Justin Herbert. I'd love to see something along those lines, just to get something started in the right direction here and get some positive drive momentum. And I think the biggest thing as far as Lombardi that is correctable this year is the red zone efficiency, because, letting this running stick in the end zone stuff, not having the right personnel out there, not using Mike Williams, not using Donald Parham, that is stuff that with the offense that is just so easily fixable compared to what is being done now, that you can just experiment and gain, a more comfortable ability going into Buffalo, going into Kansas City, going into any of these potential playoff games. So we just like to see that from the Chargers standpoint.
Yeah, I was just looking at the drop back percentages in terms of play action concepts. And, Justin Herbert is at 28.6% on the year, which is 13th among quarterbacks with 20% of the dropbacks. But since Keenan Allen and Mike Williams got back on the field, it's actually significantly lower. He's at 24% over the last month of the season, essentially in the last 5 games since everybody's kind of started to come back healthy. And that's just a trend that doesn't make any sense to me. You're running less play action with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams back. That's just it's not smart coaching, in my opinion. So this is a game. This is a stretch where Joe Lombardi and the Chargers have to continue to lean into what works, which is the play action game as opposed to the traditional drop back game. So I'm not asking for him to turn into, Marcus Mariota leads the league right now in 44% of play action attempts. Like, that's insane. I'm not asking for that. I would like to see, like 32%, 33%, like just, a couple more play action concepts a game, I think would really help this offense kind of open things up a little bit more. So that was mine. Alex, let's go with your victory formation pick next.
Yeah, the thing that I'm looking at, Steven mentioned don't run the ball. I will talk about potentially running the ball on the other side, I guess, of the field here, and that's with Cam Akers. Cam Akers has had an up and down, inconsistent season, but he had 118 yards last game and 3 touchdowns, averaged 5.4 yards per carry. Chargers, of course, I believe against the Colts gave up 5.1 yards per carry in that game. And that was one criticism of the defense. Of course, these were not like big chunk runs or anything, but it was just that, Zach Moss did get a little bit of momentum going into those runs. You would like to see the run defense tighten it up, especially as you head down the playoff stretch here. So we just like to see the run defense get a little bit better. And look, this is what the Rams are going to do because Baker Mayfield's been here and he knows like 5 plays in the playbook. They're going to run 12 personnel. They're going to have 2 tight ends on the field, and they're going to run the ball with Cam Akers or throw screens to Cam Akers or throw screens to their tight ends, right? So this is not a complex offense to diagnose. It's really just going to be, can the Rams offensive line and their kind of what the streak has been for the Chargers recently is just giving up some of these big run plays. It's been better in the last month or so compared to what it was previously in the season. But just as the Chargers round into playoff form, in the cold weather games, like you just can't have these gaps for big chunk yardage. We've seen it in some of the divisional games. We've obviously seen Pacheco, who the Chargers could play again in the playoffs. We've seen just not that there's any like elite running games in the AFC outside of probably Baltimore, but Joe Mixon is somebody that can obviously give you problems in a playoff game as well. So just would like to see the Chargers tighten up in the run game, figure out sort of what their personnel is. Obviously, Bosa edge will help in the run defense too, just naturally having him there. But just want to see the Chargers tighten things up, potentially heading into this AFC playoff run.
I could be wrong. I feel like I haven't seen a team really challenge the Chargers with those 2 tight ends or even 3 tight ends like the Seahawks would run. And they're certainly going to face that. Off the top of my head, it didn't, maybe not as intensely as someone like the Seahawks certainly have, or even like the 49ers. So really curious to see if the Rams go out and do that run 12 personnel, like you said. Because Cam Akers against the Broncos last week, just watching that game back, he was doing a number on the Broncos, and it was through the middle, on screens, whatever. Like he was getting wide open rushing lanes. I mean, I don't think it looked very difficult for him because he was past the line of scrimmage and a yard already, past the line of scrimmage before he was touched. And then in the open field, he was able to break tackles. So the Chargers definitely need to do a better job there. It's not really an interior defensive line issue overall. It's more of an edge issue. So I'm really curious. I really want to see, in the best and worst ways, for good and bad, I want to see the Chargers tested with what they've been weak against, which is some team goes out there, has a really, really good run scheme, 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends, a fullback, whatever, and takes it to the Chargers. And I don't really think the Titans were quite able to do that as much as they wanted to. So maybe that was the last team that tried it, but I'm curious if the Rams go out and do that, because Baker Mayfield's game plan was very, very simple, but they kept it so simple for him. It kind of made me jealous because it was like, okay, a great run game, easy screens, play action to the wide open guy. McVay's doing a great job getting it so simple for them. So if the Chargers want to win this game, they got to win those early downs and stop the run.
Yeah, screens that actually worked as opposed to what the Chargers have been doing all season long. So quick update here from appreciate it from a Silute. I'm gonna guess that's how you say that. They said that the fake pitch naked boot sack was 13:30 left in the second quarter. So appreciate the correction there. In terms of the Rams offense last week, I don't think people realize this. Obviously ADOT has been a big thing for Justin Herbert. Baker Mayfield's ADOT last week was 4.1 yards. So literally was like everything was behind the line of scrimmage or short yardage. So the Rams have made it pretty easily for Baker. And to Alex's point here, over the last 5 weeks, the Rams have the 7th best rush success rate in the league. So they're really starting to figure it out with Cam Akers on the ground and have really been able to, finally have some cohesion along the offensive line, which I think has really helped too. So this isn't an elite volume running attack by any means, but they're pretty efficient and effective when they get after it too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Tyler, what's your victory formation segment here?
Well, 2 of those were ones I was going to talk about. So I'll talk about a third slightly related one to what you talked about, Steven. That's just getting Mike Williams and Donald Parham both involved at a consistent rate, not just because they happen to be open, but I mean intentionally. I feel like when the Chargers were doing their most basic things last year, it was play action, slide to Mike Williams, or play action, deep crosser to, Mike Williams again, or something to Donald Parham, or leak, or whatever it was. I don't know where that's been. And it's so strange to see them get their players back, their biggest weapons back, a literal basketball team, like Arjun said. And they're just like, nah, it's not really how we're going to, use those guys. I understand that last week. I'm sure Gilmore was on Mike Williams the most. I'm sure Ramsey will be on Mike Williams the most this week, but you can find ways to get him open, to free him up, to isolate him, or just Donald Parham. These guys in the red zone, between the 20s, whatever, these guys are weapons, and it shouldn't just be that they were a read and a progression. They should be intentionally involved. I mean, Donald Parham got that one pass, and unfortunately it didn't count, but he made, again, as he always does, the one guy missed, and he got another whatever, and he got 38 yards out of it. It just came back because of, I think, a Pipkins holding call.
Yeah.
And then Mike Williams, there was that screen that he had that got the ball in his hands intentionally. I think he broke like 1 or 2 tackles, got a big first down with great blocking. They need to see more of that. It's not sexy. It's not even difficult. It's very simple. But I think if you have these playmakers, you got to get them more intentionally involved. I'm waiting for them to do what they did, not necessarily against the Chiefs, because I feel like that was just they had to throw it at Mike Williams because there was no other option at the time. But against the Texans, you see these shallow crosses. You see, I mean, when was the last time we saw Keenan, or maybe Keenan, but maybe Mike Williams catch a slant route? And I know he can do it, maybe not consistently, but he can. When have you seen a replay of him even trying one? I don't know. I don't know where the scheming up for Mike Williams has gone, but they do have to remind themselves that they're paying him not just to make the spectacular throws because Herbert throws it every once in a while, but you're paying him $20 million to do, to be your ex receiver. So treat him like one.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The usage for Mike Williams has been a little puzzling, since he came back from the injury. Obviously, the re-aggravation was a little frustrating, but I feel like we saw glimpses of what works this past week against the Colts, and then it just kept on going back to like, okay, well, the Colts are trying to take him away. It's like, okay, but your job is to get him involved. Like, that's your job as the offense. So I agree with that. I agree with Donald Parham's usage as well. I mean, it's been a little puzzling there too to see him not come back into his previous tight end 2 role and still kind of be a swing or a wingman, if you will, to Trey McKitty, which is just from a playing standpoint at least. So I would love to see those 2 players get involved again. Those 2 are kind of the ones that get the play action shots and get the play action opportunities. So give them some easy buttons. Like, I think for me, that's the biggest thing from Joe Lombardi over the last few weeks, is that there's so few easy buttons for Justin Herbert right now. Everything is so hard for them to move down the field, and you can't win like that in the playoffs. So, I'm not asking him to, put the training wheels on Justin Herbert by any means, but, just give him some easy opportunities to move the ball. And I think you do that play action. You do that with feeding Mike Williams and Donald Parham, like you mentioned. So kind of working together there.
Yeah, watching the interception against the Colts come off of stick was like, how many times has that happened so far this year? I mean, not that you can never run the play, but gosh, how many times are we going to watch some guy turn around, it bounces off their hands or bounces off defender? Well, interception, not on Herbert once again. So just tough.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about running stick, and that's obviously kind of become a meme of itself on Twitter and things like that. But it's just like, there's a higher chance of turnovers if you run stick because like everything is cramped, everything is smaller together. There is a chance that a defender is like gonna get his hands on the ball because, or if it falls off of Keenan Allen's hands the wrong way, there's going to be a third catch it, right? So you kind of just want to have easy safety valves all across your offense, like we talked about Justin Herbert, and also decrease the chances that you do turn the ball over.
Absolutely. All right, let's dive in a little bit more here and talk about some key matchups. Tyler, you went last, so I'll let you go first this time. What's your key matchup of Sunday afternoon?
Kenneth Murray versus Cam Akers and Tyler Higbee. If you watched the Rams play the Broncos, it was literally those 2 players. And considering that Baker Mayfield's ADOT and, of course, the run game is all up to Kenneth Murray too. Well, not all up to Kenneth Murray, but it certainly involves him quite a bit. And I think he's been playing pretty well, like not great, but for what I've expected of him, I think he's playing a lot better. Heck of a game against the Colts from the first like 2/3 or so that I saw. Some flashes the previous few weeks, but not great. But on the year, he's only had 32 run stops. But over the last, I think, 5 games with Braden Fehoko, that he's gotten half of his run stops. So 10, 11 games or whatever it was before. First 16, just the last 5 is the most recent 16. Over the last 3 weeks, he's been 8th in run stop rate and 20th in average depth of tackle out of 85. And again, it's big part because of Braden Fehoko, because of Morgan Fox, because of Sebastian Joseph Day. Against the Colts, he had 2 pressures, a sack, 4 run stops, and kind of a pass breakup, but it was a gimme pass breakup. But the last 2 seasons combined, he's had 3 pass breakups, and over the last 5 games, he's had 4. Again, some of them gimmies, but still, I'll take it. Like, you're around the football, you're diagnosing. And even if last week, yes, it was a gimme pass breakup, but if the guy caught the ball, he would have smacked the offensive player and held him on 4th down or on 3rd down to bring up 4th down. So you need the pass breakups, you need the run stops to show up against Akers, against Higbee. I'm not saying Kenneth Murray's an elite guy by any means, but I'm really starting to kind of key in on him over the last few weeks because he's really taken his game to a slightly better level, and that's great for the defense. Like, he's going to be on the field no matter what we want, whether he's great or bad. He's going to be on the field. So if he can take his play from being a liability to better than that, but makes plays as well, I'll take that. That's huge for the defense because that means that he has taken a step forward and the defense can take a step forward. And if they're going to funnel everything through Akers and Higbee, which is so weird to say because they didn't want Akers at one point, and Higbee isn't, Cooper Kupp or Allen Robinson, but here we are. So that's what they want to do. It seems like that's where Baker's very comfortable working with. So Kenneth Murray versus those two.
Yeah, we used to do X Factors on this show, and obviously we kind of just ran out of segments, right? But I think Kenneth Murray is honestly one of the X Factors of the defense going forward because a lot of these teams are going to start running the ball in these colder months, and obviously into the playoffs. It's one of the key things is being able to run the ball effectively, and we know that Drew Tranquill is going to handle his business. He's having an outstanding season. But Kenneth Murray, we need him to be consistent. And I think for me, one of the things that he really struggles with is when you're putting him in these situations where he doesn't have a clear attack lane and he's not able to have that lane visible right away. If he's going to have to kind of sift through some traffic and have to shed some blocks, that's really kind of where he still struggles a little bit. So if this is a game where, I don't even know who's playing center for the Rams at this point without Brian Allen, but this is a game where the centers and Ode Ibushi and these guys are able to kind of get up on Kenneth Murray, and it's going to be a bit of a longer day for him. So just hope he's able to kind of see things and diagnose things quickly and be able to go downhill because that's obviously when he's at his best. So I agree. I think that's an important matchup for sure. All right, Alex, what's your key matchup of the day?
I'm going to go with Brandon Staley versus Sean McVay in a weird way because of how the Rams season is tanked. Yeah. It's not something that we're talking about at all. But, just because of what the Chargers have to figure out in this game, talking about their offense, I'd like to get down in the one. Obviously, it allows on Lombardi and the calls he's going to do. Look, you locked up a playoff berth. I'd like to see the Chargers just kind of go for it on all 4 downs in the red zone and see if you can just get something going. Of course, secure the win, get it, if you want to jump into that 5th seed. But I'd also like to just see the Chargers, kind of use that 4th and Staley edge to them and use all the plays, sort of empty the playbook in this case for the game. Obviously, we talked about that off the party. I want to see Brandon Staley obviously kind of dial up this defense. Sean McVay is going to do some very basic things with this offense, but he's still Sean McVay, right? He still is sort of the offensive, guru that the Rams, do rely on. And, there is a reason that Baker, despite his arm being shot and despite him being on his, 11th team at this point, there is a reason that he is playing well. And that I do think has to go with Sean McVay and how he's simplified the scheme and all these things. And how Sean McVay, even after Cam Akers wanted to leave, but he didn't want to be a Ram anymore. And now he's turned him into a running back that's going to have some good value for the Rams next year. Right. So Sean McVay still made an offense run. As challenged as the Rams are right now with injuries and everything, I do still think him versus Staley is a really good coaching matchup. And, just before you go into the playoffs and you're going to have to play Sean McDermott and Andy Reid and all these guys, this is the last premier coach that the Chargers, have a chance to kind of match wins against with Brandon Staley. So curious to see what he dials up here. He's unfortunately not going to get to do battle with Nathaniel Hackett. I would have liked seeing that again, after that, the Broncos move. But yeah, this is the kind of the last in which the Chargers are going to play like a real football team led by a real football coach. So curious to just see how Staley dials things up, how aggressive he is going into this one.
Yeah, I think this will be a bigger test in terms of the game management than we've seen the last couple of weeks. Obviously, Brandon Staley had the key timeout management late in the game against the Titans, which kind of essentially won them the game. So I think that is an interesting one for sure in terms of Brandon Staley and kind of having his own postseason ramp up. So, all right, my key matchup here is going to be the Chargers pass rush. I mentioned we talked about it earlier versus the Rams offensive line. So, obviously the Broncos kind of gave up last week. You know, it is what it is. But the Broncos defense last week had 4 total pressures against Baker Mayfield last week. He was not touched a single time. So the Rams offense really kind of took it to the Broncos defense. The only player to allow a pressure last week against the Broncos was Matt Skura, their left tackle. Again, some of that is scheme, right? You're doing a lot of screens and things like that, a lot of quick game. But still, Baker Mayfield was not touched at all. Going back to last week against the Green Bay Packers, the Rams offensive line only allowed 5 total pressures. Baker Mayfield was sacked twice. So they did get to Baker the 2 times, but still, you're talking about 9 total pressures in the last 2 weeks allowed by the Rams offensive line. Again, a lot of that scheme, a lot of that in terms of, you know, the screen game, quick game, and things like that. But still, you're talking about Baker Mayfield being hit twice in the last 2 weeks. And this is, you know, the last thing you want to see happen in this kind of game is Baker Mayfield out there, you know, doing his little dances and getting a little cocky and getting confident and getting in a comfort zone. That's obviously not a pattern for success this week, because I think Baker Mayfield obviously kind of thrives off of that feeling. So you have to find a way to disrupt this passing game, even if they are running a lot of short concepts and screens. We've seen the Chargers pass rush really come alive the last few weeks. And obviously Joey Bosa coming back this week. So the Chargers pass rush has to get home on Baker Mayfield. They have to get him off his spot. They have to be able to continue to produce at a high level. So if this is an anemic pass rushing performance like we had seen previously, then it's going to be a bigger struggle than I think people will think going into this game. So again, this is kind of a moment for the Chargers to continue off of some of that momentum. And I think the pass rush is really going to be the difference here. If they're able to get home on Baker Mayfield or not, then the defense will continue to play well. If they can't get home, then this is going to be a kind of a 70 play performance from the Chargers defense. They're going to be out there all day long, and it's just going to be not super efficient this week. So pass rush has to show up like they have been doing again this week.
Yep. Baker Mayfield looked great against the Broncos. There was a particular play in the red zone. I think it was their second touchdown, or maybe his first passing touchdown of the game, where they brought a free blitzer off the edge and he got absolutely cracked, but he located and found the hot read. Perfect touchdown right down the middle. Like, he was in his bag, rollouts in the pocket, under pressure. Like, he looked, well, under 4 pressures. He looked pretty good. Under simulated pressures and designed rushes, I should say. He looked pretty good. So, yeah, they're going to have to find a way to move him off his spot. Will they be able to do that if they're running screens and just running the ball? I don't know. But, you know, winning on early downs and finding a way to disrupt on third down would be huge. I would love to see this Chargers defense continue to play. You know, as both of you guys have talked about, this is the last premium coach you're going to face until the postseason. You know, this is a guy who can coordinate kind of around Brandon Staley potentially. It sounded like back in 2020 that Staley had McVay in hell, but now, you know, we'll see. Like, I know it's Baker Mayfield. It's not Trevor Lawrence. You know, they're not playing with the same weapons and tools and, you know, everything that maybe like the Jaguars are right now. But I feel like the Jaguars had a great response and answer for everything that the Brandon Staley's defense was trying to do. Whatever they called, Trevor Lawrence, Doug Peterson, they had a response for every single thing almost perfectly. And I feel like even with Baker Mayfield, that the Rams and Sean McVay could do that. So not quite the same caliber of quarterback or even weapons or offensive line right now. But I feel like if we can see this Chargers defense continue to be the dominant force that they have been, that's really great. A really great sign moving forward. Granted, still not Patrick Mahomes, not Josh Allen.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really excited about this. Obviously, like I said, I'll be there. Obviously, Joey Bosa coming back, potentially adding some excitement there. We'll save bold predictions for Saturday. So we're gonna do our usual Q&A on Saturday, and then our game recap on Sunday. So you know, hopefully you guys enjoyed this preview. Alex, any final thoughts before we head out for the evening?
Yeah, I hope everyone has a fun time at the game. Everyone that's going, I know Arjun and Steven and Tyler are going to meet up. As we talked about on a previous podcast, this is potentially, Arjun's 21st birthday. You said, Tyler?
Yeah.
21st. Mm-hmm.
21st. So the big 2-1. Let's raise EAC per play so he doesn't talk about EPA per play.
Tyler, any final thoughts, man?
The Titans they're down by 10 to the Cowboys, but they're only down by 10 to the Cowboys, which is honestly better than I thought they would be doing. So they're 10-0. They picked off Dak Prescott. Apparently, there's a player named Jay Chestnut on the Titans, and I obviously first thought of one Joey Chestnut, but I guess that's not him. It's Julius Chestnut, I found. And you learn something new every day on this podcast. So, yeah, the Titans are, in scoring position. They could be around 10-7 at halftime. So it's my long-winded way of saying that maybe they could win next week against the Jaguars and give us a very nice first wildcard game.
There you go. Poor Al Michaels, man. He used to get all the premier games, and this year he's gotten nothing but shit on Thursday Night Football.
It's okay. He's probably relaxing on a golden couch when he goes home.
True. Very, very rich man working for Amazon this year. All right. Well, as I mentioned, that's going to do it for us tonight. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. The chat was fun tonight, as always. If you are listening to this, please leave a rating or review. We always appreciate that feedback on the audio platforms as well. So we'll be going live Saturday morning for our pregame wrap-up show. Take some questions as well as we always do. We'll do our weekly picks and final score predictions as well. So that's going to do it for us tonight, guys. We'll see you soon.